So now we're going to switch to the state of our local communities. And sitting in order from me are Mark Newcomb, the chair of Teton County, Wyoming Board of Commissioners, Bob McLaurin, the town administrator. Mayor Muldoon is out of town and couldn't make it. Hiram Johnson, the mayor of the city of Driggs, which I'm waiting for this year's extraordinary, over-the-top comparison here, Hiram, as we all are. And finally, Jeff Potter, who's the mayor of Victor. As I mentioned earlier, we had also extended invitations to the mayor of Alpine and the head of the Teton County, Idaho Board of Commission, neither of whom were able to make it. And so each of the speakers will have 10 minutes to reflect upon the state of, I guess in this case, his jurisdiction. And I'll give you guys a couple-minute warning when the time is up.
I'm talking about the state of our jurisdiction. I apologize. I do tend to get on my stump when I'm up here. It's not out of arrogance, it's out of passion. I'm going to have at it because I think we face a very important set of decisions coming up in the years ahead. What is the state of our jurisdiction? I'd characterize it as one of struggle, truly an epic struggle with ourselves to define the value of our natural environment. Without measures of value for our ecosystem and our ecosystem services, I fear we cannot meaningfully address how to preserve and protect the area's ecosystem in order to ensure a healthy environment, community, and economy for current and future generations. Should we, can we, put a dollar value on the area's ecosystem, the area's ecological amenities, the area's open space, its wildlife, its life, its wildness? To highlight this struggle, let me ask you this. Defining the area as Teton County, Wyoming, what is the dollar value for an intact, healthy, resilient ecosystem within that boundary? If you're like me, you don't know where to start. Let's dig in. Teton County has a bit over 4,000 square miles, or 2.7 million acres within its borders. Of that, roughly 76,000 acres are privately owned. Of that, roughly 21,000 acres are under some sort of conservation easement to protect some combination of scenic, agricultural, or wildlife values. Significant tracts of the public land are explicitly to be conserved, mostly unimpaired, for future generations. 45% of the county lies within Grand Teton and Yellowstone National Parks. 51% lies within the Bridger Teton and Caribou Targhee National Forests, including significant tracts of Big W wilderness in the Teton, Jedediah Smith, and Grovant wilderness areas. The National Elk Refuge comprises about 1% of our county. All that public land harbors substantial wildlife populations. You likely know better than I. 10 or 15,000 elk, a bunch of buffalo, 500 or 600 grizzly, wolves, coyotes, a few scraggly moose. I don't think I would look so good either if I was standing around outside all winter eating nothing but celery. While open space on private land, due to its valley bottom location, tends to punch above its weight in per acre importance in helping support certain species, it's the undeveloped public lands that by and large deliver the bulk of the ecosystem services we value. Undeveloped public land keeps our air clean. Imagine if all the county were private, how much air pollution would be trapped in our valley during winter inversions. Undeveloped public land by and large keeps our water clean. Runoff from mountains on public land by and large creates an underground river to constantly flush our groundwater and preserves its quality. Undeveloped public land by and large harbors the wildlife in populations our private lands could never sustain. And undeveloped public land by and large provides extensive opportunities for recreation in all its modern forms. So, taken as a whole, what is this ecosystem and the services it provides worth to you? Contrast that, if you even tried to come up with an estimate, with the value of private property and associated private property rights held on the remaining 3% not in public land, not in public hands. To be precise, as of July 10th, 2017, the state assessor certified that the remaining private land in Teton County, Wyoming, is valued at $15,222,990,853. That's pretty precise. Our inability to value our ecosystem is clashing over and over again with a system of private property rights rooted in principles of individual and economic freedom, tracing back to the Magna Carta. Actually, I throw that out there to sound erudite. I gather politicians cite the Magna Carta when trying to look informed about such things as personal freedoms. However, according to Wikipedia, it was originally about the medieval relationship between the monarch and the barons, and less about individual freedoms. Although I guess if it is about medieval power structures, then maybe it's becoming more relevant today than we might like to think. The clashes are big over things like the proposal for building a couple hundred homes on ranch land south of town, and small over things like an osprey nesting pole blocking a view corridor of Glory Bowl. They've included struggles to discern whether 40 acres entitled with 6 dwelling units and overlain by the natural resource overlay should have to cluster those 6 units, or cluster 3 of those 6 units, or none. They've included clashes over whether events like wedding parties should be allowed on large rural properties, over whether and how construction should be staged amidst development in a rapidly growing resort, over additions to houses located near streams and rivers, or over what amenities ski hills should be allowed to build and if their boundaries should be allowed to change. They've even included clashes over whether a man-made wave park near a trashed stretch of Snake River levee is an appropriate recreational amenity, whether iconic historic structures should be repurposed to house raptors, whether 21 rural acres should have 7 homes or 68. And I can assure you that each of those clashes has good people, often friends of mine, on both sides of the struggle. There are 75 or 80 pages of land development regulations that attempt to strike a balance between the exercise of private property rights and the resulting impacts to the community. They lie in Article 5, physical development standards applicable in all zones. They are onerous. The late Justice Scalia once wrote regarding the reduction in Supreme Court jurisprudence of the protections afforded to private property rights. He said that economic rights are liberties, entitlements of individuals against the majority. When they are eliminated, no matter how desirable that elimination may be, liberty has been reduced. I guarantee that these 80 pages of regs governing what you can and can't do with your property were not requested by property owners seeking to exercise their private property rights. They were requested by neighbors expressing a diminishment of their rights to be near and view various natural amenities, such as viable and healthy wildlife populations, natural soundscapes, and scenic corridors. Rarely do the neighbors in those battles express the diminishment in a dollar value. The government response in crafting those regs so that they meaningfully and effectively protect our ecosystem has been clumsy at best. As Ronald Reagan said, the most feared 9 words in the English language are, "I'm with the government and I'm here to help." The regs crafted by me and other commissioners are job security writ large. They leave the system open for constant testing so that we commissioners, typically lay people, are forced to rule on even the most minute and arcane aspects of land use law and regulation. Expensive and time-consuming appeals then leave it to the district judge and the Supreme Court to clean up after us. It is arbitrary. It is messy. And in general, when it comes to these battles over whether any one of those development proposals I just cited might incrementally diminish the area's ecosystem, who do you think will win? The private property owner who can say with a relatively high level of precision exactly how much efforts to regulate their actions diminish their property value, or the neighbor or community and their hand-waving effort to claim that the community benefit and incrementally protecting the area's ecosystem by restricting the development outweighs the diminishment in private property value. Thank you. So someone, quite possibly someone who lives here, who wanted to follow in John D. Rockefeller's footsteps and extend Grand Teton National Park right down to the Lincoln County border, wanted to do that. Could that individual cut as many checks as there are property owners, amounting to $15 billion? Lock up the land and transfer it to the National Park Service, likely over the dead bodies of the Lincoln County commissioners. Ironically, the more people that do sell their private property rights, the more valuable the remaining land left over become. And this is the final point, as I'm running out of time here. Whatever land is left behind is surrounded by that much more space, that much more wildlife, that much more wild, offering that much more opportunity to stay wild. In other words, everyone wants to live here, especially if hardly anyone else is living here. You get my gist. Alas, we keep developing, growing, incrementally reducing open space, diminishing wildlife habitat, suffocating the environment. Why, how, for what purpose? Comes back to the private property rights that are rooted in the U.S. Constitution. That ain't changing anytime soon. And as public officials, we are bound by oath to uphold the law. So, as long as we continue to develop within the myth that we are preserving and protecting the ecosystem, the remaining private property and the rights associated with the ownership of that property become ever more valuable. Does it indeed boil down to money? We can regulate, arbitrate, split the baby only so much. I look now toward you, private citizen. $15 billion. That's what the state assessor says. But what's our community? What's our ecosystem worth to you? Thank you.
The question was, if are the town and county planning on doing a detailed breakdown of what would happen, how you would cope with the loss of lodging tax revenues were it not renewed?
I think the county is on hold for just a little while to see what the legislature might do. And then we'll go into our budget planning and head scratching, real intensively in April. So what happens in March at the state level will inform a great deal as to whether we start looking specifically whether the lodging tax is still going to be there in its current form and will be up for a vote. I guess it'll be on the ballot in November, so we'll be putting thought into it. But I think 30% that goes to start pathways fire EMS will certainly need to be addressed in a very meaningful way.